Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, wherever you're joining us from. I see we've got a worldwide attendance, well over 100 attendees already in and more coming in all the time. So welcome from wherever in the world you are. It's fantastic to see such an audience. Welcome to this webinar. It's hosted by Intesi Group and Avast. My name is Andy Tobin, and I work in the Avast's Digital Trust Services team, looking after our European activities. I'm joined by a fantastic panel of experts on the topic of the European Digital Identity Programme, known as eIDAS. And the latest proposed eIDAS legislation is working its way through the approval process at the moment. And needless to say, it's generating a lot of interest, not only in Europe, but across the world as well. And it represents really a huge, significant and positive change in the way that people will be able to manage and control their digital identities online. We've seen with the EU Digital COVID Certificate Programme how successful that was, and it demonstrated how fast technology can be implemented if everyone's incentives are aligned. And in the eIDAS world, things are also moving at breakneck speed at the moment. eIDAS 2, though, is much more complex than the digital COVID certificate. Not only that, but the legislation is progressing in parallel with the selection and delivery of supporting technology. And this creates a really interesting situation where the tech is being designed and built before the requirements, i.e. the legislation, is finalized, which is always very exciting for everyone involved. So this webinar is really to help us unpick this situation and clarify what's happening and when. So please meet our panel, and I'll come to you each in turn just to introduce yourselves, please. Firstly, Vicky, would you like to just give us a quick introduction, please?
Yes. Hello, everyone, and happy to have you here to our webinar. I'm Viky Manaila, Trust Services Director with Intesi Group, an Italian qualified trust service provider. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And next we'll come to Mr. Terhes. Could you please introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Cristian Terhes, member of the European Parliament. I'm part of the LIBE committee and the main rapporteur on the opinion in LIBE on the eIDAS and everything that we will be discussing today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And next, let's come on to Mr. Vedran Lalic as well.
Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. To everyone, my name is Vedran Lalic. I'm from the office of the main rapporteur for this file, Ms. Romana Jerkovic. And my role was to sort of help navigate preparation of draft amendments throughout the process.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Mrs. Maya Madrid, could you just give us an introduction, please?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Maya Madrid, and I'm Policy Officer in the Government and Trust Unit in DigiConnect in the European Commission. That is the unit that is working in all related to the eIDAS regulation, the first version, and now the revision.
Thank you very much. I'm sure all the audience will agree that this is a fantastic panel, so thank you all very much for joining with us. Just before we move on to the bit that we're all waiting for, please note this webinar is being recorded. I think it'll go up on the Intesi website, and I think we'll get it up on the Avast website as well. Secondly, we always really enjoy getting audience questions on these webinars, so if you want to submit a question, please put it in the Zoom Q&A. Don't use chat for questions, use chat just for chatting with each other. Put the questions in the Zoom Q&A, and then we'll see them, and Alex will collate them in the background, and we'll go through as many of them as we can. Usually we get so many we can only cover a fraction of them, but we'll do our best. So on the agenda today, we've got a few key topics for you that we want to cover. Firstly, we're all very interested in the hundreds of amendments that have been proposed to the legislation. I know some of you have been picking your way through those, but we'll go through and try and pull out some of the most important ones. Secondly, we'll look at the timings and the sequencing of the legislation and technology tracks. And we also want to understand what the legislation means for qualified trust service providers who will be delivering a foundational capability for the eIDAS ecosystem. So Vicky will cover that. We'll also find out about the process for getting the legislation approved and how all those amendments are handled. And then we'll move on to audience Q&A. So I'll just stop the screen share now, so that's it for the slides for the moment. And let's move on to the first set of questions. So just picking up the first question, really, we've seen a raft of amendments from many different sources to the proposed eIDAS 2 regulations. Which do you think are the most important amendments and why? And I'll address that to Mr. Terhes first, please, if you could go ahead on that.
Thank you so much. Well, we are talking about, I would say, from different committees. The only thing that I can talk about is amendments that were submitted in LIBE committee. But we had a very limited mandate. Our concern in LIBE was in regards to respecting the fundamental rights. So there were not many amendments, in regards to the way the system is used in the external market or anything like that. We were only focusing on issues related to fundamental rights. And from all the amendments, from all the groups, the basic concern or the main concern of all is the issue of privacy. Political groups from the left to the right propose different kind of amendments, emphasizing the fact that there are some issues. The way the project was submitted by the Commission, and we are trying to fix that right now in the negotiations that we have internally. The other aspect that was raised by many of my colleagues who propose amendments is data minimization. In other words, to have as minimum data as possible, either stored or communicated among parties that we will be using this program. In my case, I would say I was one of the strongest opponents of everything, because it's after discussing with many interested parties, experts from different organizations, professors. This is actually how I met Mrs. Manaila. I tried, before I made up my mind, to listen to all the experts and all the people who had a proper background, I would say, in regards to this issue. And at the end, I concluded that the way this proposal was submitted by the Commission has so many loopholes. My proposal was the whole proposal back to the Commission, and that the Commission should have a real debate with all these interested parties so they can fix all the problems before they are coming in the Parliament. Because here the decisions we are a political body at the end of the day. We are not a technical body. So the decisions here are made based on political decisions. You have to form majorities, and not all the time members of the Parliament are voting based on technical expertise, but they vote based on political reasons, I would say. And this file, besides obviously being a political file, it's also a very technical file. So if you don't have proper technical background, in my case, I worked as a programmer before I was elected here. So I was kind of open to many things, and I saw loopholes where others of my colleagues without any technical background were not able to see. But this is an aspect that, or many of these aspects, they should have been addressed at the Commission level before the proposal came to us. So that was what I proposed in LIBE committee. The majority of my colleagues said, no, let's try to fix it here. So that's what we are trying to do right now. We will see what will happen at the end. But as far as the two major issues, I would say, that were raised by all of my colleagues in LIBE is the issue of privacy and data minimization. In my case, I also raised a serious concern, the issue of the unique identifier, where every EU citizen will have a unique ID, something similar to the social security number in the States. The problem is EU is not a country. It's hard to kind of mark people with these numbers at the EU level, considering the fact that, you know, you don't have pretty much an EU citizenship, you have a national citizenship. So there was an article a few days ago in Euroactive where representatives from the Commission said that they are even willing to you know, not pursue, I would say, this avenue, where every EU citizen will have a unique and persistent identifier. We will see how this will end. I'm still pushing that we should not have such a number at, or not necessarily a number, because it's a varchar, an alpha numeric number. And what I proposed was to use the whatever number we have at the national level. You might call it social security or somewhere else or someone else we should use that number instead of the EU level, and that will solve the problem, because then you have the national states will have jurisdictions over how these numbers are released and how they are handled, instead of being the way it is envisioned right now, to have a unique identifier at the EU level, and then we will run into this problem. Whereas data stored, who's responsible for it, and all these issues related to privacy and data minimization. We are still in debates, still negotiating. We will see by fall how the end result will be.
I was going to, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you actually about how you handle the technical nature of the legislation. It is highly technical, but as an ex-programmer, it sounds like
well, the problem is pretty much the file is divided here. At our level, we don't talk too much on the technical side, because this is part of a different thing that more the Commission will be working with. And this is one of the criticisms that we had, because we were asked to vote. I mean, due to my proposal, pretty much, we postponed this file with 6 months, because they just came with this proposal and said, well, you got to move fast, you got to finish it in 2 months. Well, we said, hold on a second, let's see what's in it. So when we start looking what's in it, and we saw all these technical details that, you know, the majority of the members of the parliament had no idea about, you know, I said, well, give us more time, you know, to talk and debate. And we still have a problem with the so-called toolbox, where at the level of the Commission, they will be the one kind of creating the technical side, but we don't have access to that yet because it's not developed yet. So this is a problem in itself, where members of the parliament are asked to vote on something that they haven't seen. So we're still talking about it. We'll see how and what the end result will be.
Very, very good. Thank you for a very informative answer. Let's come on to Vedran next. I guess you're on the receiving end of a lot of these amendments coming in, aren't you? How do you see the amendments coming back, and how would you respond to some of the things that Mr. Terhes has just talked about?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it took us also some time, and this is along the lines of what Mr. Terhes said. It took us some time to really wrap our heads around the proposal, due to how complex, also from a legal and technical point of view, the whole proposal is. So I think initially, yes, there was intention by the Commission to move much faster with the legislation, but that was really not feasible for various reasons. One of them being, as already mentioned, this very technical nature of the proposal. But I think also, just to contextualize maybe the kind of historical moment in which we are currently in, I think what we see now, also with the war in Ukraine, but also with the experience coming back from the COVID pandemic, is that really digital identity has never been as important as it is today, both for citizens and for the businesses. And I think there is a lot of expectations from citizens about this proposal. And I think we have a responsibility to really try and meet those expectations. I think a lot of times you will hear in a kind of colloquial conversations that, you know, this is really Europe's opportunity to deliver the level of success that we had with the roaming regulation. And I think really this is the ultimate goal that we need to try and kind of achieve here. So create a true single market for the provision of trust services in the whole of EU. And I think more broadly to really set a global benchmark for what digital identity is going to be going forward. We already see that there is a lot of competition in the market from the United States, also from other Asian countries. And I think this is the moment where we need to come up with a proposal that, similar to what was achieved in the GDPR, really sets a global benchmark. I think for us as the lead committee, yes, we had a much more broader mandate to introduce many really amendments. I think in total our office alone tabled around 170 amendments. Which is quite significant, again, considering how complex the file is. But I think also I need to be, it would be disingenuous to say that we managed to achieve this alone. By no means. I think I would like to also thank many stakeholders that we have met during this process and who have really kind of helped us go beyond this kind of technical barrier and try to really understand what is behind the text being proposed by the Commission. So this is as much what we delivered, at least in the draft report. It is as much our work as it is their work. So thanks once again to everyone who achieved this great result. I think from the perspective of the main rapporteur, she tried to focus on 4 main areas in her draft report. Which was, I think, widely received as positive. Of course, not everything was perfect, but we did our best. These 4 main areas that she covered in her report are cybersecurity, governance of the new framework, data protection, and the digitalization of public services. I think from the cybersecurity perspective, we welcome the fact that the Commission has set a high level of security for digital wallets. And the fact that by default we are starting from a high ground in respect to the level of assurance that the digital wallets will need to comply with, because digital wallets will really be a container of multiple personal data, most sensitive personal data. I would say it is only justified that the cybersecurity certification of the wallet will be at the level of assurance high. Then when we talk about data protection and privacy, I think really the data protection and privacy in this proposal are really the DNA of this proposal, so to speak. We really tried to do our best to further reinforce and align the proposal also with the GDPR. And I think our principle was to really that the basic functionalities of the wallet should be both cybersecurity and privacy by design. So in many ways, trying to kind of be proactive at the early stage of the design of the wallet and build in all the safeguards necessary for the wallet to really be, I think, both secure, privacy enhancing, and user-friendly. And then we also, when we talk about the governance, I think this is where the rapporteur was maybe the most ambitious in relation to the Commission's text. We proposed a whole new chapter on governance. We felt that the current system, as much as it has proven itself in eIDAS, original eIDAS, is really not up to the task when we talk about the new framework. The new framework is much more complex. There are many more stakeholders involved in this new ecosystem. So we really felt that the new governance framework needs to be also to reflect the level of ambition that we're trying to achieve with this proposal. That is why we tried to put a lot of emphasis on the governance, make sure that the roles of different stakeholders in the new ecosystem are clear. We also introduced this notion of single point of contact. So basically just to ensure that there is much more coordination at the EU level. We like to draw the parallel here with the COVID-19 experience. I think also the experience of that crisis shows that, have we already managed to have successful coordination mechanisms before the pandemic, I think by no doubt we would be much more successful in dealing with this crisis. Whereas now we're trying to really catch up to the crisis. And just to conclude, I think the digitalization of public services is a hugely important aspect of this proposal. We know that the situation between the member states, when we talk about how digital they are, varies a lot across the EU. Some have been really at the forefront of digital transformation, and some are lagging behind. And we need to try and use this proposal really to help those that are lagging behind really catch up and use the best practices in those member states that have really gone far in their digital transformation, to kind of try and see what the best experiences are, and really not to try and reinvent the wheel, saying that we need to do everything from the ground up. No, we already have a lot of solutions, proven solutions. So let's see what solutions work and try to put them to use in this regulation as well. And I think just in general, smart public services are really very crucial. And I think it's important to bring opportunities, not just to both for citizens and businesses. And I think digital wallet will really in the future be a key enabler of digital transformation of e-government. And we very much welcome this digital wallet also from this perspective. So I think I was quite comprehensive, but I will stop here, and then we can go into more detail if that needs to be in going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vedran. I think the breadth of your answer indicates the breadth of the scope of the actual program itself, which is large. And you brought up the roaming agreement and GDPR. I think with eIDAS, it's quite different to GDPR. eIDAS is a huge opportunity for the private sector as well, isn't it? It's not, yes, here's another thing you've got to click on a website. It's a potential for transforming e-commerce and taking away a lot of those annoying things online that you have to keep doing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also this is, this proposal really is also about, we also see it as an important step towards further EU integration. When we talk about cross-border provision of services, I think it has a lot of potential also to boost, the data economy, digital economy in general. And I think there is also this important element that, it's also an important opportunity for us to strengthen really Europe's digital sovereignty when we talk about the area of digital identity. And it really has the benefits. It really has a lot of potential to bring real benefits to both the citizens or consumers, if you will, and businesses, in the sense that, we can really create the whole process of accessing services, both public and private, much more frictionless, much more modern, bearing in mind, the 21st century that we live in, the fast-paced life that we live in. I think it's essential that we use this regulation to really empower citizens. And this will be a huge task of this proposal. And bearing that in mind, I think, we also need to be aware of this kind of a digital divide that exists in our societies, also between urban and less developed regions in the member states. So I think this digital divide is something that we need to bear in mind, and really make sure that this process of digital transformation leaves nobody behind, and that it's really inclusive and socially just and really empowering. Once again, I think this is what this proposal should be about. And I understand there is a lot of skeptics behind this proposal, but for us, it really is a positive story. Of course, if you manage to hit the right balance between all these different moving parts, between the privacy, between the security, and I think ultimately, again, as we mentioned before, it really needs to be user-centric and easy to use. Otherwise, we know that we will not generate wide uptake, which is ultimately the goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking as someone in the private sector, I can tell you there's a huge amount of interest in the private sector, for exactly those reasons of smoothing and online transactions, increasing security, and just making it more pleasant for people to use without being tracked everywhere. Let's come on to the next question. Thank you both for that. We'll just sort of shift here onto the sort of process, and we're seeing parallel tracks of legislation as well as large-scale pilots and wallet development taking place. So really interested in how the technology deliverables can progress when the legislation is not complete, and the sequencing of this. So I'll come to yourself, Maya, and I'll just share my screen as well here for you. As you've put together a slide deck for us. So please take us through what's happening and when, and how do we resolve this sort of parallel activity that we've got going on?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, for the opportunity of explaining this, I have just share. I wanted to share a few slides because it's not a very easy process. It's let's say quite challenging from the beginning. So I thought it was better just to visualize this and to try to make you understand what has happened and where are we now. So at the same time, the revised regulation was proposed. The Commission adopted the recommendation calling on member states to work together to develop a common toolbox that has been mentioned before. And this toolbox, the aim is to support the implementation of the European Digital Identity Framework. So what you need to keep in mind is the toolbox is a process that is run by member states, but it's in close, of course, collaboration and coordination from the Commission. So this toolbox needs to include an architectural reference framework. Let's put it that is the implementation part. How is this defined? The common standards, the technical specifications, and common guidelines. So this is what member states in the toolbox process are working on. So this toolbox should serve as a reference for implementing acts that will be proposed further to the European a digital identity framework regulation once is adopted. Of course, the outcomes of the toolbox process will need to adapt to the negotiations on the legal part, because we are in the toolbox process. Member states are closely looking at what comes out of the regulation, because of course the implementation needs to follow exactly what is decided by the legislator. So it will be served as this implementing acts. The implementing acts, just to explain a bit, because maybe not everybody knows what is this. The implementing acts will define more precisely how to implement the regulation. So to define these implementing acts as soon as possible after the adoption of the regulation, we will use the outputs from the toolbox that are running in parallel of the legislation process and will be the base for these implementing acts. So this toolbox should be finalized and published by the Commission by October of this year. And as I say, this is a parallel process with the one on the legislative area that is running in the Parliament and in the Council. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Just to define a bit more on what is the objective and how this toolbox output is very, very important to other processes that runs in parallel. So when the toolbox has identified the common standards and the specifications, and member states have agreed on the architectural reference framework, this architectural reference framework will be the basis for two important parts of the developments of the European identity framework. And these two important parts are first, the reference implementation of the wallet, because I mean, the same way the Commission put at the service of member states when the first eIDAS was developed, reference implementation of the eIDAS nodes, the Commission will put at member states' disposal also a reference implementation of the wallet, so they could use that to offer to their citizens. And the same way, the toolbox needs to inform the large-scale pilots through the architectural reference framework, because the large-scale pilots are meant to test the wallet. So to test the wallet in the context of practical use cases in national and cross-border contexts. So these large-scale pilots need to be also based and be aligned to what is decided by member states and defined in the architectural reference framework. I will talk a bit more about the large-scale pilots later to explain a bit how is also the process. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So this is a scheme of the organization that has been created for the Toolbox process. You see in the middle, there are like 4 main working groups. This is very technical, but just to explain you how we are working. So the core working groups are working in the core functionalities of the wallet, in the security, in the governance, in the reliance of the wallet. But these working groups take information and requirements for use cases, because in the end, we are trying to build a system that that is something that will be useful and usable by citizens in practical cases. So that's why the use cases requirements are very important in the Toolbox process. So you see here that you have in the left the use case requirements, in the center the core groups that are working on the definition of the architectural reference framework, and that what comes out of the architectural reference framework will fit the reference application of the wallet, but also the large-scale pilots. So maybe we can just go to the next slide, and I will talk a bit about what is the procurement. So there's also another process, that is the procurement process, that has the goal of building a wallet reference implementation. This will not only support the member states and other stakeholders in developing and implementing it, but also it will help to scale up the European digital identity framework. It will serve as a basis to enable also piloting. And the procurement is linked not only to the Toolbox process, because the wallet reference implementation will be based in the architectural reference framework from the Toolbox, but it's also linked to the large-scale pilots, because the large-scale pilots are required to test the different wallet reference implementations that we will be offering to member states. So just for you to know, the tender of the reference implementation was launched on June. We will start working on a product based on the architectural reference framework in September, October, when we have the agreement of member states. We wish to have a minimum viable product by the end of the year. And we are also, of course, planning, because the first one it's foreseen to be only a minimum viable product, but it's foreseen that we have subsequent releases with extension functionalities that comes from the feedback from the pilots that will be using this reference implementation. So
that's all open source as well, isn't it? So theoretically, anybody could take that reference implementation and build on top of it. Is that the intention? Yes.
I mean, anybody. The intention is that it's open source, as are now the eIDAS nodes. So anybody could take it and use it if they wish. Then we have the final, let's say, pillar of what it has been this development of the European identity framework, that are the large-scale pilots. So as I said before, the large-scale pilots are there to test the reference implementation in practical use cases. We wish to have pilots for main use cases that have been presented in the Toolbox process, but are not limited to that. We were thinking of a mobile driving license, procurement, digital payments, exchange of university diplomas. But of course, the call for the large-scale pilots is not limited to this area. So member states proposing any other pilot will also be evaluated. And the large-scale pilot will contribute to finalizing the concept of the wallet. And it's very important that member states participate, but because the large-scale pilots are able to test the wallet in the different national contexts that, of course, are very, very important to be taken into account. So I think that's all on the presentation, but the idea that I wanted to give is that we are, let's say, having a process that it's challenging, that we are running parallel process to be able to, whenever one step is ended, it can immediately feed the next one. So we are able to offer citizens the European Identity Wallet as soon as possible. Of course, everything not depending, but looking at the legislative process, that is the one that is really defining how the final implementation will look like.
Maya, thank you for talking us through that. It is indeed quite complex, but I think you've simplified things particularly well. And the understanding that the parallel threads are going to feed into each other, right? So do you think if there were some significant issues that happened during an early stage of the piloting process, that would result in maybe the legislation being changed or vice versa?
Well, what we expect is that the legislation process fits the implementation. So, of course, and in fact, they will fit the reference implementation, and that will impact the pilot implementation. But this is something that we have taken into account, and we are always looking at the outcomes of the regulation of the discussions on the legislative part. And of course, it would have been, let's say, easier to start the process of the implementation right after the regulation has been adopted, but then we will have delayed the process years, probably. So that's why we have, let's say, thought about doing it this way.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Okay, that was really interesting. And let's now go to the next question. Really, this is for Viky, and we want to now bring in the capabilities of qualified trust service providers in this ecosystem. And there have been quite a few amendments that might impact qualified trust service providers. So Viky, it'd be good for you to just tell us what these mysterious QTSPs do, and how you're going to handle this new legislation, and particularly some of the amendments that have come in. And I know you sent me a slide, so let me just get that, that screen share up for you. So Viky, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Andy. Well, the qualified trust services provisioning according to eIDAS initial eIDAS regulation is a stable and mature market. We all know what to do and how to provide our services, but with the new proposal of the regulations, there were some challenges, and I try to bring to your attention just two of them. One related to the compliance with the NIS2 directive, and here I very much welcome the Parliament revision and amendments to the original proposal of the regulation, and hope will stay like that, in the sense that a qualified trust service provider will no longer need to be supervised in parallel by a different supervisory body to go through a different conformity assessment according to NIS2 directive, which is a directive, and we know what can happen to be implemented differently within the member state legislations. And once again, thank you for sorting out this situation. But what is happening when a qualified trust service provider, for instance, issuing digital certificates for electronic signature, would like to rely on identity of the citizens through the eID wallet for giving them the capability to sign documents on the fly. So let's suppose the user doesn't have yet a certificate, and he gets a document to be signed. How to do that? Because the wallet will enable the qualified electronic signature. And we know as a trust service provider that the identity verification is mandatory at the highest assurance level for qualified electronic signature. And in that case, the qualified trust service provider would use the electronic identity piece from the eUDI wallet, case in which it would become a relying party. And we know that for relying parties, there are different requirements. There is not actually a supervision process or an auditing process or conformity assessment process. And my take would be for the panelists here to give a thought on how could be amended, or how could be clarified the usage of the eUDI wallet by a qualified trust service provider for provisioning of its services, because we don't want to stay on two boats actually, when we are highly regulated, highly supervised, and would not bring a seamless process for the citizens in the end. And this is what our aim is, to provide a tool, a mechanism for the citizens to be able to improve their digital life and to access public and private services very easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. I think lots have changed for the QTSPs then. And actually, you've raised an interesting point around these different registries and supervisory bodies.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes,
and one that I find really interesting is the relying party registries. And I think there was an amendment that was submitted about relying parties having to register with their member state in order to accept credentials from an EU wallet. Is that?
Yes,
I wonder
and that amendment I'm referring specifically because in that case, the qualified trust service provider would become at the same time a relying party. So it should be clarified somehow, a situation like that. So a special derogation, let's say, for a qualified trust service provider, relying on the eUDI wallet for the provisioning of its services. In that case, is not becoming a relying party and should not be registered to a different authority.
Yeah. I wonder actually if we could just throw that question over to Vedran to look at, because I think there's been quite a bit of pushback on enforcing relying parties to register to accept an eUDI wallet. You know, they don't have to register to look at a passport or a driving license. Have you come across any feedback along those lines, Vedran, at all? You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry. I think this is one of the issues that has become kind of on the radar from early stage. There was a lot of concerns from different stakeholders that they essentially that we should basically pay attention to the fact that what kind of personal information will the reliant parties have access to in the digital wallets. So we felt compelled to really respond to those concerns. That is why we propose that essentially all the relying parties that want to gain access to digital wallets should really inform the member states about their intended use and allow the member states to really scrutinize the intended purposes. I think this goes in the direction of trying to really preserve the level of data protection for the users of the wallet. It may seem like a little bit of too much red tape, but this has been the challenge throughout the proposal, to really balance on one side concerns surrounding privacy and security, and on the other to make it flexible enough so it can actually have a positive impact. And this is something that, of course, going forward, we will need to, I think, thread carefully. And by no means, what we proposed is currently finalized. So I think there's still some room for maneuver and for some clarifications down the road. But yeah, I think this is an important question, and I'm sure we will have to come back to it.
Yeah, I think that will come out of the pilots as well. I think there'll be a lot of feedback on that one. We're just moving to audience questions by now, if you haven't realized. We've got one here that I'll address to Mr. Terhes. It's from John Calzaretta, who says, has a de facto form factor for the wallet being defined? Is the fundamental belief that it will be a mobile device? And I think this comes back to what you were saying, Committee for Civil Liberties and Inclusion was on it. Have you got any views on the form factor for the wallet and how people will interact with it?
Well, in the discussions that we had with the European Commission, they said that this so-called wallet will be on a mobile device, but this is creating the problems on the other side. What do you do with people who do not have access to the internet, for example? What do you do with people who cannot afford a smart mobile device? So there are many other issues that we are discussing here, and that haven't been, I would say, fully solved. And listening to the presentation and reading some of the questions, the perspective of us in LIBE, it's looking at this issue from the side of a regular citizen, not of businesses, not of governments, not of whatever other interests. And as I mentioned in LIBE, because this file is so technical, and because this file is going to affect pretty much everybody in the EU, citizens as well as businesses, we have to openly talk about risks and challenges, because this is exactly like promoting a car, for example. You can talk about all the features of that car, how fast might go and all those things, but then what about the risks? Are the brakes properly working? When you press the brake, how fast or how soon it's stopping, all these things. And there are still many loopholes here. There are many questions, I would say, that are not answered yet or properly answered. And you were mentioning, the previous speakers mentioned about, and I saw some of the questions about the government being involved. This was actually one of the issues that was raised by one of the stakeholders talked to. If this data, it's still not clear yet how this data will be stored, who will be fully controlling the data, regardless if it's in one place or divided among multiple servers. The problem is, what do you do if a hostile government, for example, let's say Russia or China, gets hold of this data? Imagine if you are a public official, or if you are a military officer, for example, and all that personal data about you gets into the hands of your enemy. How? So these are serious issues that have to be discussed, that were not properly addressed yet. Clearly, businesses and the internal market is going to benefit from this, but we also have to look at the risks and challenges and try to find solutions to them, because this is a powerful tool that can obviously bring a lot of benefits for many, but also can harm many. And the question is, are we willing to sacrifice, the risks just for the benefits, or we have to find the proper balance here? And this is what we are trying to do right now in the parliament. And this is the reason why I think these kind of discussions are important, because each one of us is looking, I would say, at this from one perspective, and the more people we have talking about it, and exposing this from different perspectives is opening all of our eyes, to look at this, in a more comprehensive way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think people tend to focus on the happy path, but as you know, as an ex-programmer, the unhappy path is the one you've got to work on most. So getting that right first is really important. Thank you for that. There's some really awesome questions coming in. We're only going to be able to do a fraction of them in the time left, which is about 10 minutes. Here's another one. This has come from Damien Glover. Mr. Lalic mentioned that he sees it as important to create opportunities for business as well as citizens. Does this mean the Commission is supportive of the proposed amendment to allow citizens to receive and hold verifiable credentials from private sources in the same wallet as well as from public sources? I wonder who would like to take that one? Vedran, would you like to take that? Maybe then we'll come on to Maya for your opinion as well. So can you put private sector credentials in your wallet as well as the public sector ones?
Yes, absolutely. In our view, that should be possible. Here, I think it's important to make a distinction between the qualified and non-qualified attributes. So I think what we also did is that we basically opened the door for the non-qualified attributes, the possibility for the non-qualified attributes to be actually stored in the wallet. And I think this is also something that can really, we have done so in anticipating the kind of future evolution of the wallet, because I think really the possible use cases and applications are really endless, and it would be short-sighted to kind of try and limit, at this early stage, applications coming from non-governmental sector. I think this would really this would be counterintuitive to the proposal and what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, by all means, credentials coming from the private sector should be able to be kind of integrated part of the wallet. And here we anticipate something like, I don't know, maybe your gym membership cards, your coupons from your supermarket. You should be able to store all these credentials that really present no major privacy concern inside your wallet, and really go in the direction of storing all those documents that we stored in a traditional document inside of a mobile phone or the application on the mobile phone. So yes, I think from us, this would be a logical evolution of this regulation, and we would be supportive of that going forward.
Yeah, thanks. So it's really good to hear. Manu Fontaine in the chat has just said a bulging wallet. So, maybe Maya, yes. Can we come to you as well? And maybe just about interaction with the private sector in the process as well. There's a lot of interest, but how does that interest with the private sector get handled within the process you have?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of interest from many parties. Yeah, it's true. But on what relates to the toolbox process, this process is it's a member state process. Yeah. Member states agree on an outline of what is the architectural reference framework that it's published, and that we shared with private or public stakeholders to be able to comment on that and to test a bit what is the opinion of external stakeholders, of course. What I wanted to say is that in fact, the regulation and what's first, the importance also here is to note that the inclusion of the private sector is really, really very, very important, and one of the key drivers for this proposal, because one of the things that was not working with the first eIDAS regulation is that the private sector was not a component of the ecosystem of that. So it is very important that the private sector really takes their role on issuing, not only on issuing verified credentials, that of course they can, but also as relaying parties, of course.
Yeah, and there's a question on that as well. I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so let me just come on to this other question from Martin Voulon, which is one I've been puzzling about as well. His question is the mandatory acceptance by banks based on PSD2 APIs I think there's something in the proposed legislation about organizations that rely on strong customer authentication having to accept the wallet. Is that right?
Completely right. This is in the proposal. I mean, yeah, private sector also required and strong user authentication will be required to use the wallet. This is in the proposal. Let's see what comes out from the legislative discussion. But yeah, this is in the proposal, as well as large platforms also using the wallet for identification of users.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe Vedran, you might want to comment on that as well. So this means that essentially relying parties like banks will have to accept the wallet. Therefore, they need to get a move on with their projects, right? To get started. Do you think?
Yes, and I think when we talk about banks, I think they should be in the clear, because I think they already now have a very strict legal requirements, and I think when we talk about authentication, they are at the forefront of this segment. So I think for them, some kind of adjustment period should really be negligible, and I think they already are in a good position to really, with their experience, to really kind of accelerate the uptake of the digital wallets. So by all means, strong user authentication is very crucial for the deployment of digital wallets and for creating a kind of a trustworthy environment in which they will operate.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe ask this one to Viky as well. Is there some sort of help that organizations are going to get from the likes of QTSPs to integrate with eIDAS, do you think, or are they going to be on their own pretty much?
Usually qualified trust service providers are helping their customers, their organizations that they are working with and provide services for, to integrate seamlessly the new provisions of the new regulations that are coming into force. So, of course, we are working side by side to adapt the services to the new requirements, bringing the latest technologies on the market.
Yeah, I think that's the adoption.
That would be the key for the success and the rollout of the initiatives. Otherwise, we'll break in parts.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, as Maya said, that private sector side is vitally important. Right, I note that we're on time. It's now 3 o'clock in the UK. We have about another 800 questions that we could go through, but I think we'll spare our panelists from going through them all. I know we haven't got to as many as I would like or as you would like, but I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone who's joined, all the questions and the really good chat that I see just scrolling up the screen at 100 miles an hour as well. So Mr. Terhes, Maya, Vedran, Viky, can we say thank you very much to you for joining, and we look forward to seeing how this evolves. There's so much huge potential for eIDAS, I think, and we're right at the start of it, so very exciting to be involved. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll close the webinar at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.